I got a boat.
If there was to be a fiction book written about Dutch Van Der Linde, that would be fascinating to see how he would be portrayed. From his demeanor, the way he walks and talks, how he'd be dressed, his interaction with other gang members, and what he thought of other gang members. The first person and third person perspectives of the way he thinks and his motivations towards everybody. That would just be the coolest thing ever because he is unlike any character I've ever seen before. So here we go. I'm going to take Dutch and break him down in his personality and in his story arc in a way that's never been done before to any character in Red Dead Redemption. So with the Big 5 personality model with its 5 main traits and sub-traits, all of this in an effort to unpack the character that is Dutch Van Der Linde. The Big 5 personality model is a tool used by psychologists over the years to really give the personality dimensions and ways to put points on characteristics of certain people to make sense of really what people are and what encompasses their personality. So it's really just 5 main categories of somebody's personality. I have combed over hours of footage in-game of Dutch Van Der Linde to find specifically where in the game these characteristics show up and flaws that they might have. The Big 5 personality model includes agreeableness, conscientiousness, extraversion, neuroticism, and openness to experience. Now there are 2 or 3 subcategories that go with each of those 5 traits, but I will break those down as we get to them. I will also be giving each trait and subtrait a point or a score of 1 out of 100, with 100 using happy as an example as the most happy person in the room, and 1 being the least happy, probably very, very sad person in the room. On the very simple terms, that's what it is. I was considering throwing his IQ into this video as well, but that would take a whole different video to break that down, since we don't have an IQ test for him. So let's move on to the first trait of the Big 5, and that is agreeableness. That has 2 sub-traits of compassion and politeness. On a macro scale, agreeableness is really how you confront conflict. That's why men's incarceration rates are a little bit higher than women's, because they are lower in agreeableness, which fits Dutch and the whole gang really extremely well, because they're all outlaws and wanted by the law. On a micro scale, it has to do with your compliance, your kindness, and how trusting you are towards other people and if they can go to you with their problems. So if you're high in agreeableness, you are compliant, nurturing, kind, naively trusting, and conciliatory. However, your tendency is to avoid conflict and often hide what you think in fear of avoiding that conflict. But if you're low in agreeableness, you're not so nice, stubborn, dominant, harsh, and skeptical. You're competitive and in extreme cases very predatory. However, you're straightforward and blunt, so people know where you stand. And so that's often a trait I would assign with being more of a leader. So you speak your mind, you tell the problems, you tell it how it is, because that's going to benefit the whole gang in the end. There is one scene that I definitely think shows his agreeableness and his compassion trait, which we're about to touch in a second, with the insist cutscene. A lot of Dutch's real personality and his agreeableness and several other traits as well are shown in this insist cutscene, where Arthur insists that Dutch let the women go and little Jack Marston. Here is that scene now.
But if we let Jack and the women free, well then maybe we can... freedom for no one in this country no more, Arthur. One more big score, we got enough money to leave. All this turmoil has the army and Pinkerton spinning. We take a boat and slip away.
I don't know what you're saying, Dutch, but it seems like I've heard it all before.
Just one more
There's
train.
always a goddamn train.
Arthur! This is different. We know this is full of cash. Army payroll, money and supplies to repair the bridge that you blew. This is all going to plan. We rob Uncle Sam and we leave. The poetry of it all. What do you think?
It sounds wonderful. Hell, I ain't got much to lose, but you gotta do what's right and cut some loose. John and his family, I'm afraid I have to insist. I mean, we gotta let him go, 'cause if the Pinkertons come through again, they will kill everyone.
John? Insist?
Yeah.
That is the score I'm going to give Dutch Van Der Linde, 25 for agreeableness, so he's pretty disagreeable. Not the worst. It's not absolutely terrible, but it's very low on the end, and that's kind of where it shows through when things get extreme. And that moves us on quickly to the other subtrait of compassion to agreeableness. If you're highly compassionate, you're really interested in other people and how other-oriented you are in helping them and helping out the young and helpless and making sure they avoid negative emotion and are doing well. But if you're too other-oriented, you don't focus on yourself, so it can be very detrimental. To be a leader of the gang, Dutch really is inherently a little bit compassionate. You see the amount of women he's taken in and of children with Jack, and he really is, in the end, trying to help them out more than himself. And that is exactly how Rockstar portrays him right in the beginning of the game, where he gives a speech to the whole gang about surviving, and that really shows inherently he's got some compassion for the people he's with. Here is that scene now.
Listen to me, all of you, for a moment. Now, we've had, well, a bad couple of days. I loved Davy, Jenny, Sean, Mac. They may be okay. We don't know. But we lost some folks. Now, if I could throw myself in the ground in their stead, I'd do it gladly.
There is also a scene where Dutch's real compassion shows through as he lets Micah convince him to leave what they thought was orphaned Jack at the time.
Well, sorry, son. Without John, she's just bait. Got a bunch of money, Dutch. She's just a girl. They won't do nothing to her. But me and the boys know. Yep. We need to keep riding on this one, Dutch. You know it. Every man here knows it.
So we just gonna let the boy be made an orphan? It ain't like that. What is it like?
I wanna live, cowpoke. I still got the choice. Dutch, it's just a girl.
You're right. Dutch, Micah, it pains me to say it, Arthur, but he's right. Dutch! Come on, boys.
So I'm going to give Dutch a compassionate score of 40 and politeness of 30, since technically all of his motivations are done for the good of the gang. He cares about everybody. And I put the politeness score a little bit more closely linked to the agreeableness score, since it does have to do with the obedience to law and confrontation. So with agreeableness overall low at 25, compassionate and moderate at 40, and politeness moderately low at 30, let's move on to conscientiousness. Conscientiousness is really one of my favorite traits and has two sub-traits, which is industriousness and orderliness, both that have huge impact on your success in life. In today's terms, conscientiousness really predicts how well you do in school, and your obligation, attention to details, hard work, persistence, cleanliness, and adherence to rules, standards, and processes. Long story short, it's really your ability to make, create, and follow a plan. But the one scene that stands out the most to me, where this was ever more clear, not just to Dutch's plan, but when Dutch was about to execute the girl that had ratted on the entire gang, despite everybody watching.
Arthur, she's a fool. Get her out of here. You know the rules.
Not so big now. Hurry, Your Majesty.
You...
She knew the rules, Arthur.
I am convinced Dutch would have been able to pull the trigger because there's nothing throughout the rest of the game that says he would not be able to kill somebody, even if everybody else was watching. And it's that whole adherence to the rules of everything that shows just how incredibly conscientious Dutch is. But not only is Dutch good at making plans and coming up with new ideas, he's very good at following them through. Throughout the entire game, he's coming up with new things to do and doing it right on to the end, so that ties closely with industriousness. Watch this scene here.
Buy us some time. It looks like Mr. Cornwall's company has signed a railroad contract with the Army. And they're also moving dynamite down from, well, the Annesburg mines to Saint Denis to resell. And there's bonds at his oil factory. Maybe there's a way to get them off our back and get the money that we need. Mike, you look into this dynamite. Take Bill, I guess. Arthur, you go too. We are gonna need a lot of it. And Mike, we need to talk. Figure out some things.
Of course, boss.
Figure out what?
The plan.
90 is the score I'm giving for Dutch Van Der Linde for conscientiousness, which means out of a room of 100 people, he is one of the most conscientious, plan-oriented, list thinkers there are. That moves us on to, briefly, industriousness. Men are more industrious than women, and people who are very high in this trait usually look down on people who are incompetent and judge them quite harshly. People high in this trait also are hardworking and feel bad about what they haven't finished and like to finish what they started. There's a few comments between Dutch and Arthur that really highlight Dutch's industriousness and drive to go on.
The bank is our bet. Hosea agrees.
Even after that?
Especially after that. I don't feel so good.
Now you just got a bash on the head.
Despite a concussion and a failed bank heist where everything went wrong, Dutch is driven to move on, and this will lead us into another trait called Neuroticism that we're going to touch on later. So I'm going to give Dutch a score of 95 for industrious. There's not many people that can go through all the things he's been through and still want to keep pushing forward, but he does it. Now there is one more small subheading of conscientiousness, and that is orderliness. Orderliness is really how disgust sensitive you are. Can you handle messes or can you not stand them? Are you a slob that doesn't care of anything, or do you try to keep everything kind of neat and tidy and in order? So I put Dutch really a little bit above average considering the scenarios he's in. He has to set up camps and pack up camps and kind of live all over the place, but the way he walks around and kind of holds himself is very upright and proper, so he does a fairly good job at handling himself. I give him a score of 65 for orderliness. So, in conscientiousness at 90, industriousness at 95, and orderliness at 65. All traits of a leader who, I guess in the end, goes a little bit too extreme. That leads us to our third trait of the Big Five with extraversion, with sub-traits of enthusiasm and assertiveness. I will be defining extraversion as really how it sounds like, how social you are and how you do in social situations, and how optimistic you are about the future. In today's terms, people who are exceptionally high in extraversion make very enthusiastic employees and are exceptionally well suited for jobs involving sales, persuasion, working in groups, and public speaking. Especially if you are particularly low in neuroticism, which we will again touch on later. There are several scenes which I can show you throughout the game which highlight Dutch's extraversion from when he's speaking in front of people, and one of my favorites to being when he goes to meet the mayor of Saint Denis, Angelo Bronte.
Senor Bronte, that horrendous snake has invited us to the ball, Cinderella. So my suggestion is we go and get you a gown.
You son of a...
We are ridiculous. Utterly.
I ain't never been to a ball in my life.
Nor have I, if I am being honest.
I used to quite often. There can be fine pickings.
No pickpocketing. We are here to make real contact.
What kind of contact?
Well, I don't know. We'll find what we can. All I know for sure is we are going to a party at the mayor's house, and the guest of honor is the worst crook in town. I'm sure that we will find something.
Okay.
Compared to Bill Williamson, Dutch handles himself extremely well throughout these scenes with Arthur and Hosea and has no problem walking right to the front and speaking with Angelo Bronte.
That one. See that red? He's the mayor. Henri Lemieux. He'll do anything for $1, and I mean anything.
Politics is a foul business.
Yes. Oh, and that one too. That is Alberto Fusar. He owns sugar...
Dutch also thrives under pressure when dealing with people. This is one of my favorite scenes right here when he's backed up to a cliff with Arthur Morgan.
Follow my lead. I got a plan. This is a good one. Hello, officers.
You keep them hands up and come here. Put your hands up.
Hello, Captain.
Keep your hands up and come here. Come here.
We can't do that. Your man... Those men they killed? They were good men. You're fighting nature, Captain.
Get over here.
Ask my friend here. My whole life, I tried to fight change. It's a waste. I see that. Now, it's waste. You can't fight nature, Captain. You can't fight change. You can't fight.
That's why I'm giving Dutch Van Der Linde a score of 99 for extroversion, because there's no one that I know if they can handle that many guns and that many eyes and that many faces on him at once and thrive under the pressure that he does. There's only one other person that I could see being as extroverted, or if not the one more person that is more extroverted than he is, and that is Josiah Trelawney, but maybe we'll have to do a breakdown of him sometime too. There are negative effects that do come with too much extroversion, and that is too much optimism. There's no doubt that Dutch is extremely optimistic, but there are times when it is too much. The first subtrait of extroversion is enthusiasm. Individuals who are extremely high in enthusiasm are extremely excitable and happy and easy to get to know. They will talk remarkably rapidly about everything and everyone, and they laugh all the time and absolutely must be around other people, and they very much enjoy parties. So very closely linked with extroversion, and really gets down to the more specific details of being extroverted. This subtrait isn't quite as strong as some of the others because he doesn't crave attention and he's not necessarily a jokester. However, he is extremely optimistic throughout the entire storyline. But a time when I found Dutch to be extremely enthusiastic was when they were singing on the fishing boat.
I asked that gal to give me some. She says wait till the taters is done. I couldn't wait till the taters was done. I couldn't wait till the taters was done. Threw her on the floor and knocked off some.
So with that, I'm going to give Dutch Van Der Linde an enthusiasm score of 60. Now we move on to the other subtrait of extroversion, to be assertiveness. Don't worry, Plankton doesn't need to do any coaching here because Dutch Van Der Linde is plenty assertive, a form of behavior characterized by a confident declaration or affirmation of a statement without need of proof. Assertive people are take-charge types, and they are associated with being a leader. They can sometimes be impulsive and in consequence can act without thinking.
A boat.
They can also be strongly influential and captivating. Dutch Van Der Linde is really able to insert or assert himself into anywhere.
You get your boss down here and now so we can talk about this like gentlemen.
And although I think Dutch has the capacity to score 100 on the assertiveness scale, I think on average he's around an 85 or an 80, because he does get influenced by other people occasionally.
Dutch.
The fourth main trait out of 5 is going to be neuroticism. Neuroticism is a little bit harder to measure from the outside because it's usually done by personal tests, evaluations, and questions asking somebody like, do you remain calm under pressure, and do you have frequent mood swings? Individuals who are high in neuroticism are much more likely to experience depressive mood tendencies, such as worry, fear, anxiety, loneliness, and guilt. Dutch really doesn't have many scenes at all where he loses his cool. He always remains calm under pressure, even if the pressure is negative. Neuroticism is so important in leaders that if Dutch was ever to get down about the state the whole gang was in, everyone's mental state would fall apart. And from the beginning of the story to the end of the story, as long as Dutch is in charge or in a position of leadership in front of the gang, he is staying very positive, if not for his own sake, but for everybody else's sake.
Everybody, we're safe.
Only towards the end of the story does Dutch really start to show any neurotic tendencies, and only when he's with close gang members, not in front of everybody else. For me, it was the scene when he finally came face to face with Leviticus Cornwall for the last time. Watch this scene here.
I'm undone already. Even my best friend here, he thinks I'm crazy. And like this poor fellow you are talking to, my feelings are hurt.
You robbed me, sir.
And you robbed him. Funny world.
You show a criminal's grasp of sophistry, sir. I did no such thing.
You kill. I kill. You rob. I rob. Only difference I can see is I choose whom I kill and rob, and you destroy everything in your path.
I've heard just about enough.
I'll tell you what. You give me this ship, $10,000, and safe passage out of here, I'll let you live.
I'll do no such thing.
You sure? Good. I prefer it this way.
You lost your mind!
Noise, Arthur! No!
Dutch slowly becomes more and more neurotic throughout the course of the story, so the score I'm giving him is 30 on neuroticism. Even Arthur is coming to realize that Dutch is going a little bit crazy and giving in to his neurotic impulses. First subtrait of neuroticism is withdrawal. Withdrawal is really what it sounds like. It has to do with how you specifically react to negative stimuli. An example of somebody in the gang with a high withdrawal is Hosea. He's the oldest member of the gang and tends not to take the provocative route of things and does not want to always go to violence if that's possible. Dutch does not do that, however. Individuals low in withdrawal rarely suffer from or are impeded by anticipatory anxiety, meaning he doesn't worry about things so much that it keeps him from doing them. Individuals low in withdrawal can handle new and uncertain events, things that are unexpected, and situations that are threatening or complex. Even when individuals get hurt, like when we saw Dutch get a concussion from the bank heist, they are not usually deterred by it. The perfect example of Dutch's low withdrawal trait is when he had to go see the hanging of his archenemy, Colm O'Driscoll. Dutch donned disguises with Arthur Morgan and Sadie Adler just to get a glimpse of his archenemy being put to death, even in the city where they were wanted fugitives.
Us being wanted men, we're gonna attend the event ourselves.
And follow him onto the scaffold?
Well, let's hope not.
So with a very low withdrawal score of 15, we move on to our second sub-trait of neuroticism, and that is volatility. Volatility is closely linked to agreeableness, and if you're provoked in a dispute, how negatively and harshly you will react to that. People low in volatility very rarely express their disappointment and frustration, so people find them very easy to get along with. And if they do vent their frustration, they cool down and relax fairly quickly. This trait has been linked to the fight, flight, or freeze response, so if you have a high volatility, you'll likely fight. If you have a low volatility, you might freeze or run away. And an interesting point in volatility, low volatile people aren't very argumentative. And just like other traits we've already discussed, Dutch does not appear very volatile, at least in conversation throughout the story, until things start going wrong. I found this dialogue here between Arthur and Dutch as they're riding through the night where they argue.
Thank you. For what? For taking my side back there.
It ain't about sides.
Feels like Hosea's lost his spine.
This move on Bronte, is it for the bank job or revenge for what happened at the trolley station?
Both. Neither. What does it matter? We need to hit that bank. And Bronte has the police and just about everything else in Saint Denis in his back pocket. He also set us up. And lest we forget, took young Jack.
I understand. We just got a lot of pots on the boil, given all the folks who's out gunning for us.
You all seem to have forgotten how money is made and what it takes to support 20 people.
Volatility is definitely a trait that grows the most throughout the course of the story, but why does it show up later? I think it was suppressed mostly by his high amounts of conscientiousness, but when things start to go wrong, this trait starts to show up and he reacts negatively towards a lot more stimuli. I would say given the fact that Dutch Van Der Linde is an outlaw along with everybody else, that puts his volatile rate a little bit higher at 60. And now on to the last category of the Big Five model, and that is openness to experience with subtraits of openness or creativity and intellect. This trait is really summed up in how creatively and intellectually curious you are.
East and west, we're gonna get a boat, we're gonna get on a river, and we're gonna go north.
New York.
Then Tahiti, the Fiji Islands, or this place, New Guinea, dancing girls, freedom. But first, we have to make a whole lot of smoke.
That scene right there shows that Dutch is not afraid to think fancifully and come up with new and creative ideas and places for the whole gang to go. Dutch is intellectually curious enough because he did learn how to read and was able to teach John and Arthur how to read. Openness to experience also includes abstract thinking and philosophy and the meaning of belief systems and ideologies, and there is one scene that kind of shocked me when it came by because I wasn't expecting it. It really shows a part of Dutch that you don't see very often in the game here when he's talking to Bill with John and Arthur and they're all going out alligator hunting. This line even kind of shocked me.
Doubt you saw things, Bill, but your tiny little mind was too small to comprehend what you saw. What you saw was people who lost everything to savagery. Savagery of peasants. Failures come from Europe to reap some awful vengeance on God's last creation.
Interesting way you boys gotta prepare for a killing.
I'm sorry I wasted my life trying to teach you boys. Love you though, I do.
Well, leaving love aside, you think we got this?
Don't you never leave love aside, Arthur. It's all we got.
That scene actually has so much more in it than you would think, because it has that abstract thinking, philosophy, meaning of belief systems, and ideologies closely hinted at by Dutch, but because they're going alligator hunting, he doesn't sit down and tell you all that. but he also says never leave love aside because that's all we got. And to me, that was something I really was not expecting to hear out of Dutch, especially in the middle of a swamp. Dutch is also very capable of handling abstract thought, such as the Pinkertons, the well-being of his entire gang, the O'Driscolls, money, and of course, the plan! Now, intellect is more specifically just interest in abstract ideas, not necessarily IQ. You can have a very high IQ in terms of processing speed of your brain, but have a low interest in abstract ideas. So with that, I will put both openness to experience and creativity about the same, an 80, and intellect at about 60. There is really nowhere Dutch won't go in terms of the safety and well-being of his gang. If he has to take them to Tahiti, by all means he will figure out how to and will go to Tahiti. If he can't go east and south, he'll go west. If he can't go west and south, he'll go east, and if he can't go anywhere, well, he'll figure out how to make it where he's at. And that really takes somebody who has some strong leadership qualities, who is not afraid to do exactly what needs to be done and follow the rules of his own set gang, someone who's not necessarily crazy and going to react to every little negative whim, a person who's willing to reach out a helping hand to little Jack Marston and Bill Williamson when he's drunk and trying to rob him. If you guys like this breakdown, I will probably be doing some more in the future for Arthur Morgan and some other members of the gang, so don't forget to subscribe so you can see those. Toodles!